My grandfather sold my belongings for his new wife's wedding, so I sold his car. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into my childhood bedroom and saw bare walls where my mother's watercolor paintings used to hang. Grandpa Joe. I called out, dropping my backpack by the door. I'd just gotten back from my last final exam of junior year at state, exhausted but relieved to be home for summer break. The house felt different somehow, too quiet, too empty. I opened my dresser drawer where I kept Mom's jewelry box, the one with the tiny ballerina that spun to for Elise. Gone. My hands started shaking as I tore through the rest of the drawers, then rushed to the closet where Dad's guitar collection had been stored since I moved in here 4 years ago after the accident. Empty. All of it. Gone. Grandpa Joe. This time I screamed it. He appeared in the doorway looking sheepish, running his weathered hands through his gray hair. Behind him stood Candy, yes, that's actually her name, his 25-year-old fiancée with her platinum blonde hair and fake nails, wearing a sundress that probably cost more than my textbooks. Now, kiddo, before you get upset, he started. Where is everything? Where are Mom's paintings? Her jewelry? Dad's guitars? My voice cracked on the word guitars. Dad's 1967 Fender Stratocaster had been his pride and joy. Grandpa Joe's face flushed red. Well, you see. Candy and I, we needed to pay for the wedding venue. The Riverside Country Club required a $15,000 deposit, and you sold my parents' things. The words came out as a whisper. I couldn't breathe. They were just sitting there collecting dust. Candy chimed in, her voice sickeningly sweet. And Joey wanted to give me the perfect wedding. Isn't that romantic? Joey. She called my 67-year-old grandfather Joey. Those weren't your things to sell, I said, my voice getting stronger. Mom's jewelry was specifically left to me in the will. Dad's guitars. You're living in my house rent-free, Grandpa Joe interrupted, his tone turning defensive. Going to college on my dime. I figured you could contribute something to this family's happiness. I am your family. I shouted. Or I thought I was. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and called my friend Marcus, who worked at Fletcher's pawn shop downtown. Marcus, it's me. Did an older guy come in recently trying to sell some guitars and jewelry? Oh man, Marcus's voice was sympathetic. Yeah, about a week ago. I tried to give him good prices, but he seemed in a hurry. The guitars went fast. Collector came in yesterday and bought the Fender for $3,200. The jewelry's probably gone too, sold most of it to some dealer from Phoenix. $3,200. Dad's guitar, the one he taught me to play Blackbird on, the one he promised would be mine someday, sold for wedding money. I hung up and stared at my grandfather. This man who'd held me while I cried at my parents' funeral. Who'd taught me to drive in his 1965 Ford Mustang. Who'd promised me that as long as he was alive, I'd have a family. The wedding's next Saturday at the country club, Candy announced, examining her nails. You're still invited, of course. I picked out the most gorgeous dress. It was $2,800, but Joey said I deserved the best. My mother's engagement ring probably paid for that dress. I need some air, I managed to say, and walked out of the house that no longer felt like home. I drove around town for 3 hours in my beat-up Honda Civic, my mind racing. Every turn seemed to lead me past another memory, the music store where Dad used to take me to browse guitars, the art supply shop where Mom bought her watercolor paints, the diner where Grandpa Joe and I used to get chocolate chip pancakes every Sunday after church. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, the sun was setting and my phone had buzzed with 6 missed calls from my best friend Sarah. I'd texted her earlier in a rage-fueled rant, and she'd been trying to talk me off the ledge ever since. The house was dark except for the living room, where I could hear Candy's shrill laugh mixing with some reality TV show. I slipped in through the back door and went straight to Grandpa Joe's study. He was in there, hunched over his old wooden desk with a calculator and a pile of bills. Kiddo, he said without looking up. We need to talk. Yeah, we do. I sat down in the leather chair across from him, the same chair where he used to help me with homework. I want a list of everything you sold and where you sold it. He sighed and pushed a crumpled piece of paper across the desk. I kept track. Thought you might ask. My hands shook as I read. Mom's jewelry box and contents, Fletcher's pawn shop, $850. Dad's 4 guitars, Fletcher's pawn shop, $4,100 total. Mom's paintings, set of 6 sold to neighbor Mrs. Henderson, $300. Dad's vintage band t-shirts, online, $180. Mom's china set, consignment shop on 5th Street, $220. The total at the bottom made me sick, $5,650. This isn't even half of what you said you needed for the deposit, I said. Grandpa Joe wouldn't meet my eyes. Candy's family contributed some. And I took out a second mortgage on the house. You what? $25,000. The wedding's costing more than we planned. The dress, the flowers, the photographer Candy insisted on, he charges $3,500 just for the day. But she's only getting married once, kiddo. She deserves. She's 25 years old, Grandpa. She could get married 10 more times. I stood up, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. And what happens when you can't make the mortgage payments? This house has been in our family for 40 years. Candy's got some business ideas. She wants to start a lifestyle blog, maybe do some influencer work. I almost laughed, but nothing about this was funny. With what followers? Her Instagram has 847 people on it, and half of them are bots. That's enough. His voice carried the authority it used to have when I was 12 and talked back. I know you're upset about your parents' things, but I'm trying to build a life with someone. I've been alone for 3 years since your grandmother died. You weren't alone. I was here. The words hung between us like a challenge. For a moment, his face softened, and I saw a flicker of the grandfather who used to braid my hair and make me grilled cheese when I was sick. Candy makes me feel young again, he said quietly. And I make you feel old. He didn't deny it. From the living room, Candy called out, Joey. Come look at these centerpiece options. The crystal ones are only $150 each, and we need 12. $1,800. For centerpieces that would sit on tables for 4 hours. I folded the list and put it in my pocket. I'm going to buy back whatever I can find. With what money? I looked at him, really looked at him. When had he gotten so small? So easily manipulated by a woman young enough to be his granddaughter? I'll figure it out, I said. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Candy's voice drifting through the thin walls. She was on the phone with someone, probably her maid of honor Brittany, discussing last-minute wedding details. And then Joey said we could upgrade to the premium bar package. I know it's another $1,200, but it's open bar, and my sorority sisters are coming. They'd die if we only served house wine. I pressed my pillow over my head, but her voice cut through anyway. Oh, and the wedding favors. I found these adorable crystal picture frames for $30 each. We need at least 50. Another $1,500. I did the math automatically now, tallying up each expense against my parents' memory. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, * called in sick to work today. Meet me at Rosie's Diner at 9. We need to make a plan, *. Sarah Chen had been my best friend since sophomore year when we got paired up for a brutal organic chemistry lab. She was the most logical person I knew, pre-med, straight A's, and completely no nonsense. If anyone could help me figure out how to fix this mess, it was her. I found her at our usual booth at Rosie's, already nursing her second cup of coffee and scribbling calculations on napkins. Okay, she said without preamble as I slid into the cracked vinyl seat across from her. I've been thinking about this all night. How much money do you have saved up? About $800 from my work-study job. And maybe $300 in my checking account. It sounded pathetic when I said it out loud. So roughly $1,100. According to your text, the pawn shop got $4,950 total for everything. She showed me her napkin math. Even if you could track down every item, you'd need at least $7,000 to buy it all back at retail prices. My stomach dropped. So it's impossible. I didn't say that. Sarah pulled out her phone and started typing. Marcus at the pawn shop, he's cool, right? Think he'd tell us who bought what? Maybe. Why? Because if we can find the actual buyers, we might be able to negotiate. That collector who bought your dad's Fender. Maybe he's a decent guy who'd sell it back at cost if he knew the story. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt a spark of hope. You think? It's worth a shot. But Emma. Her voice turned serious. We need to talk about the bigger picture here. What your grandfather did was legally theft. You could press charges. The thought had crossed my mind around 3 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. He's family, Sarah. He's the only family I have left. Family doesn't sell your dead parents' belongings to fund a trophy wife's princess fantasy. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Grandpa Joe's number flashed on the screen. Emma, where are you? His voice sounded strained. We need to talk. Something's happened. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? Just, come home. Please. The line went dead. Sarah and I exchanged glances. That didn't sound good, she said, already standing up and dropping a 10 on the table. We drove back to the house in tense silence. Grandpa Joe's vintage Mustang was in the driveway, but something was wrong. The front door was wide open, and I could hear Candy sobbing from inside. I found them in the kitchen. Candy was hunched over the table, mascara streaming down her cheeks, while Grandpa Joe paced behind her with his phone pressed to his ear. Yes, I understand, but there has to be something we can do. The wedding is in 5 days. He saw me and ended the call abruptly. What's going on? I asked. Candy looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. The country club canceled our wedding, she wailed. They said our deposit check bounced. I stared at them, trying to process what I'd just heard. The check bounced. But you said you had the money from selling my parents' things. Grandpa Joe's face turned ashen. We did, but there were other expenses. The dress, the flowers we already ordered, Candy's engagement ring. You bought her another ring. My voice came out sharper than I intended. What happened to Grandma's ring? The one you were married with for 43 years. It wasn't my style, Candy sniffled, holding up her left hand to display a gaudy diamond that had to be at least 2 carats. This one's from Tiffany. Joey wanted me to have something special. I felt like I was going to be sick. How much? That's not important right now, Grandpa Joe said quickly, but Candy was already answering. 8,000. Isn't it gorgeous? It matches my wedding band perfectly. That was another 3,000, but it's a set, so. $11,000. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs. You spent $11,000 on rings while selling my mother's wedding ring for pawn shop prices. Emma, please, Grandpa Joe started, but I held up my hand. No. Let me get this straight. You sold $5,650 worth of my parents' belongings, took out a $25,000 mortgage on the family house, and you still can't afford this wedding? Sarah, who'd been standing quietly in the doorway, pulled out her phone and started typing. I knew she was doing calculations. She couldn't help herself when numbers didn't add up. The country club said they'll give us 48 hours to bring certified funds, Grandpa Joe said. If we can't, we forfeit everything we've paid so far. How much is everything? Sarah asked. Candy pulled a crumpled invoice from her purse. The venue deposit was $15,000. Then we put down $3,500 for the photographer, $2,800 for my dress and alterations, $1,200 for the flowers, and $800 for the cake. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. $23,300. Where did you think that money was going to come from? The mortgage money. Candy wailed. But then Joey surprised me with the ring, and we had to buy him a new tux because his old one didn't fit, and I needed shoes and a veil, and my bachelorette party in Vegas cost more than we expected. You went to Vegas? I interrupted. When? Last weekend, Grandpa Joe mumbled. Just a quick trip. Candy's friends flew in from Phoenix. Sarah was still typing on her phone. Let me guess. Flights, hotel, restaurants, shows. What did that cost? Only $4,000, Candy said defensively. It was my bachelorette party. You only get one of those. Actually, I said coldly, statistically, you'll probably get 2 or 3. Candy's face crumpled again. Why is everyone being so mean to me? I just wanted a perfect wedding. With someone else's money, Sarah muttered under her breath. Grandpa Joe's phone started ringing. He glanced at it and his face went white. It's the bank. They probably want to discuss the mortgage payment that's due next week. The room fell silent except for Candy's sniffling. I looked around the kitchen where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for 4 years, where Grandpa Joe had taught me to make his famous scrambled eggs, where we planned my college schedule over cups of coffee. Answer it, I said quietly. Emma. Answer the phone, Grandpa. He did, stepping into the hallway. I could hear his voice getting more strained with each yes, sir, and I understand. When he came back, his hands were shaking. They want the first payment by Friday. $1,847. If we miss it, they'll start foreclosure proceedings. Candy looked confused. What does that mean? It means, Sarah said with brutal clarity, that you'll lose the house. But where will we live? Candy's voice was getting higher and more panicked. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the linoleum. I need some air. Emma, wait, Grandpa Joe called after me, but I was already heading for the back door. I ended up sitting on the old wooden swing in the backyard, the one Grandpa Joe had built when I first moved in. Sarah found me there 10 minutes later. Okay, she said, settling beside me. I've been thinking. About what? About how much that Mustang in the driveway is worth. I looked at her sharply. Sarah, no. Hear me out. It's a 1965 Mustang convertible in mint condition. My dad's a car guy, I know what those go for. Probably $35,000, maybe more. I can't sell his car. Why not? He sold your parents' belongings without asking. The swing creaked as we sat in silence. Through the kitchen window, I could see Grandpa Joe and Candy huddled over more bills, probably trying to figure out which disaster to handle first. That car is his pride and joy, I said finally. He's had it since before my dad was born. And your mother's jewelry was irreplaceable. Your father's guitars were priceless to you. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. He made his choice, Emma. Maybe it's time you made yours. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Sarah had said. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Candy's voice through the walls as she called vendor after vendor, trying to salvage her dream wedding on a budget that had evaporated faster than morning dew. But you have to understand, we're not canceling, we're just postponing. Can't you hold the flowers for maybe 2 weeks? At 2:17 a.m., I gave up on sleep and crept downstairs to get some water. The house was finally quiet, but light spilled from under Grandpa Joe's study door. I found him slumped over his desk, surrounded by credit card statements and loan documents. Can't sleep either, he asked without looking up. I sat down across from him, noticing how much older he looked in the harsh desk lamp light. What's the damage? He rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. Worse than I told Candy. The mortgage payment is just the beginning. I've got $18,000 in credit card debt from wedding expenses, and the second mortgage has a balloon payment due in 6 months, $8,000. Jesus, Grandpa. Watch your language, he said automatically, then caught himself. Sorry. Old habits. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he pulled out an old photo album I recognized, the one with pictures of him and Grandma Ruth from their wedding day in 1975. You know what our wedding cost? He asked, flipping through pages of faded Polaroids. $250. Ruth's dress was $75 from Sears. Her ring cost me a month's salary from the factory, but it was only $300. In the photos, they looked impossibly young and happy. Grandma Ruth's dress was simple but elegant, and her smile could have powered the whole town. She was beautiful, I said. She would have hated all this. His voice cracked slightly. The fancy venue, the expensive dress, what did Candy call them, crystal centerpieces. Ruth would have said it was throwing money away. Then why are you doing it? He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he said, because when you get to be my age, you start thinking about last chances. Ruth's been gone 3 years, and I was so lonely, Emma. So damn lonely. But you had me. I love you, kiddo, but it's not the same. You're young, you've got your whole life ahead of you. In 5 years, you'll graduate and move away, start your own family. I needed someone who chose to be here. The words stung because there was truth in them. I had been planning to move to Portland after graduation, maybe get into grad school there. So you sold my parents things to keep her happy. I panicked. He closed the photo album and looked directly at me for the first time. Candy said her ex-boyfriend in Phoenix was willing to take her back if things didn't work out with us. Said he could give her the kind of life she deserved. I couldn't lose her, Emma. I couldn't be alone again. And now I'm wondering if being alone might have been better than losing you. Before I could respond, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Candy appeared in the doorway wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my textbooks, her blonde hair perfectly arranged even at 2:30 in the morning. Joey. Her voice had that baby talk quality that made my teeth ache. What are you doing down here? You need your beauty sleep before our big day. About that, sweetheart, Grandpa Joe said carefully. We might need to make some changes to the wedding plans. Candy's face immediately shifted from sleepy sweetness to sharp attention. What kind of changes? Well, the country club situation, and the budget. You promised me a perfect wedding, she interrupted, her voice rising. I gave up everything for you. I left Phoenix, I left my job, I left my friends. The least you can do is give me the wedding you promised. What job? I asked before I could stop myself. She shot me a look that could have frozen hell. I was a very successful Instagram lifestyle consultant. You were a bottle girl at a sports bar, Grandpa Joe said quietly. You told me that the first night we met. Candy's face flushed red. That was just temporary while I built my brand. And anyway, that's not the point. The point is that I've already told everyone about the country club wedding. My sorority sisters are flying in from Phoenix. My cousin's driving up from Tucson. I can't just call them and say, sorry, we're having it in a backyard now. Maybe they'd understand if you explained, Grandpa Joe started. No. Candy slammed her hand on the desk, making the photo album jump. I've been planning this wedding for 6 months. I've posted about it on Instagram 67 times. I'm not going to humiliate myself because you can't manage your money properly. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my grandfather's face crumple as the reality of his situation, and his fiancée's priorities, finally sank in. Candy, he said slowly, I might lose the house. She stared at him for a long moment, then shrugged. So we'll get an apartment. They have some nice ones by the country club. With what money? I'm $26,000 in debt and facing foreclosure. For the first time since I'd known her, Candy was completely speechless. I could practically see the calculations running behind her eyes, not mathematical ones like Sarah would do, but something far more mercenary. I need to make some phone calls, she said finally, and walked out of the room without another word. Grandpa Joe and I sat there listening to her footsteps retreat upstairs, then the sound of her voice through the ceiling, low and urgent. She's calling Phoenix, he said. It wasn't a question. Probably. He nodded slowly, like a man who just watched his last hope walk away. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. Okay. Do you think there's any way at all, that you could ever forgive me for what I did? I looked at this broken old man who'd raised me, who'd held me when I cried, who'd taught me to drive and helped me with calculus and promised me I'd always have a home. Ask me after I get my parents' things back, I said. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No reality TV blaring from the living room, no phone calls about wedding vendors, no Candy's voice drifting through the walls. I checked my phone, 8:47 a.m. Usually she'd be up by 7, doing her morning skincare routine that she documented religiously on her Instagram stories. I found Grandpa Joe in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. She's gone, he said without looking up. Left around 5 this morning. Took 2 suitcases and that fancy jewelry box I bought her last month. I'm sorry, Grandpa. He let out a bitter laugh. Are you? Really? I sat down across from him, studying his face. I'm sorry you're hurt. I'm not sorry she's gone. Fair enough. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his shirt pocket and slid it across the table. She left this. The note was written on hotel stationery. Apparently she'd been planning her exit strategy for a while. The handwriting was all loops and hearts dotting the I's. Asterisk Joey. Thank you for everything, but I can't marry someone who can't provide the lifestyle I deserve. Brandon says I can move back in with him and we can have the wedding I actually want next spring. He's already making partner at his law firm. I'm keeping the ring since you gave it to me as a gift. Don't try to contact me. See asterisk. Brandon? I asked. The ex-boyfriend in Phoenix. Turns out they never really broke up, she was hedging her bets. Grandpa Joe took a sip of his cold coffee and grimaced. She called him right after we talked last night. I heard her through the bedroom door, telling him I was financially unstable and asking if his offer was still open. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, asterisk working at the hospital today but call me later. Found contact info for the guitar collector, asterisk. The country club called an hour ago, Grandpa Joe continued. They're keeping the $15,000 deposit since we can't provide certified funds by tomorrow. The photographer and florist are keeping their deposits too. $23,000, gone. I did the math quickly. Plus the $11,000 for her rings. Which she took with her, along with that bracelet I bought her for Valentine's Day. Another $800. He rubbed his temples. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. What? Do you have anywhere else you can go when the bank takes the house? The question hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? I mean I'm 67 years old, I've got $26,000 in debt, and my only income is Social Security. Even if I sell everything I own, I might not be able to dig out of this hole. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. I can't ask you to go down with this ship. This is my home. It was your home. Now it's collateral for an old fool's midlife crisis. I stared at him, remembering the man who used to take me fishing every Saturday, who taught me to change a tire in the Walmart parking lot, who'd stayed up all night with me when I had pneumonia my freshman year. What about the Mustang? I asked quietly. What about it? You could sell it. Pay off some of the debt. Grandpa Joe's face went pale. Emma, that car is worth at least $35,000. Maybe more. I pulled out my phone and showed him the Kelly Blue Book listing Sarah had found. 1965 Mustang convertible, original engine, mint condition. There's one just like it listed in Phoenix for $38,000. He stared at the screen like I'd just shown him photos of his own funeral. I've had that car for 42 years. I bought it the year your father was born. And Dad's fender was from 1967. The year he was born. My voice was getting harder. But that didn't stop you from selling it for wedding money. That's different. How? How is it different? Because, he stopped, and I could see the exact moment he realized he didn't have an answer that made sense. My phone rang. Sarah's number flashed on the screen. I thought you were working today, I answered. I am, but I'm on break and I have news. The collector who bought your dad's fender. His name is Robert Martinez, and he's actually a really decent guy. He restores vintage guitars and sells them to musicians who can't afford new ones. My heart jumped. Did you tell him the story? I did. Emma, he wants to meet with you tonight. He said if everything checks out, he'll sell the guitar back to you for exactly what he paid, $3,200. I looked at Grandpa Joe, who was still staring at the Mustang listing on my phone. Sarah, I'll call you back. What was that about? He asked as I hung up. A chance to get Dad's guitar back. For $3,200. You don't have $3,200. No, I said slowly. But you do. In your driveway. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, both of us understanding exactly what I was suggesting. Outside, a garbage truck rumbled past, and somewhere in the distance, Mrs. Henderson was calling her cat. You want me to sell my car to buy back your father's guitar? I want you to fix what you broke. Grandpa Joe closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked so tired I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. And then what? He asked. Even if I sell the Mustang, I'm still in debt up to my eyeballs. Still looking at foreclosure. Still a broke old man who got played by a girl young enough to be his granddaughter. Then we figure it out together, I said. Like family. He opened his eyes and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. After everything I've done, you'd still want to help me? Ask me after I get my parents' things back, I said, repeating my words from the night before. But this time, they sounded less like a condition and more like a promise. That afternoon, I met Robert Martinez at a small coffee shop downtown. He was nothing like I'd expected, probably in his 50s, wearing a faded Metallica t-shirt and jeans, with calloused fingers that spoke of years working with instruments. When he saw me walk in, he waved from a corner booth where my father's 1967 Fender Stratocaster sat in its case like a piece of my childhood. You must be Emma, he said, standing to shake my hand. I brought the guitar so you could see it's been well cared for. I sat down across from him, my hands trembling as I stared at the familiar sunburst finish. Can I? Of course. The moment my fingers touched the strings, muscle memory kicked in. I could practically hear Dad's voice, remember, kiddo, it's not about playing fast, it's about playing with feeling. The guitar was perfectly tuned, the frets polished to a shine. Your grandfather said it belonged to his son who passed away, Robert said gently. He seemed like he was in a real hurry to sell. Yeah, he was. I ran my finger along the edge where Dad had carved his initials, JM 1974 when he was 16. This guitar taught me everything I know about music. Sarah mentioned you're trying to track down other items he sold. I nodded, pulling out the crumpled list. My mother's jewelry, her paintings, some other guitars. It's like my whole family history got scattered to the wind for a wedding that didn't even happen. Robert's eyebrows shot up. The wedding fell through. This morning. The bride ran off with her ex-boyfriend, took an $11,000 engagement ring with her, and left my grandfather with $26,000 in debt. Jesus. Robert shook his head. Look, Emma, I'll be straight with you. I've got $3,000 into this guitar, and normally I'd need to make some profit to keep my business running. But this situation. He gestured at the fender. This belongs with you. $3,200. Exactly what I paid. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by panic. I need to ask, would you be willing to hold it for maybe a week? I'm working on getting the money together. Sure thing. But can I ask how? Sarah mentioned you're a college student. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Grandpa Joe, changed my mind about the Mustang. Can't do it. Sorry, I stared at the message, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Actually, I told Robert, I might need longer than a week. When I got home, I found Grandpa Joe in the garage, polishing his Mustang with the same methodical care he'd shown it for as long as I could remember. The car gleamed under the fluorescent lights, its red paint job flawless despite being nearly 60 years old. So you're not selling it, I said from the doorway. He didn't look up from buffing the chrome bumper. I can't, Emma. This car is all I have left of the man I used to be. Before I became a fool. What about Dad's guitar? That's all I have left of him. I'll find another way to get your money. How? You're already $26,000 in debt, and the mortgage payment is due Friday. I stepped into the garage, inhaling the familiar smell of motor oil and car wax. Face it, Grandpa. You don't have another way. Then I guess I'll lose everything. His voice was flat, defeated. The house, what's left of my dignity, probably any chance of you ever forgiving me. You're being selfish. Now he did look up, his eyes flashing with something between anger and hurt. Selfish? I raised you for 4 years, Emma. Paid for your college, put a roof over your head, never asked for anything in return. And now when I want to keep one thing, just one thing that matters to me, I'm selfish? You sold my parents' belongings without asking. And I'm sorry for that. Sorrier than you'll ever know. But taking my car won't bring your mother's paintings back. It won't undo what I did. No, I said quietly, but it might be a start. We stood there in the garage, the Mustang gleaming between us like a beautiful, expensive barrier. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Henderson calling for her cat again, and the sound of teenagers skateboarding past on the street where I'd learned to ride my bike. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Sarah, Marcus says the jewelry dealer from Phoenix is back in town tomorrow. Might be our only chance to track down your mom's rings, I looked at my grandfather, still clutching his polishing cloth like a lifeline. The choice is yours, I said finally. But make it fast. Because tomorrow I'm going to Phoenix to find that jewelry dealer, with or without the money to buy anything back. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's guitar sitting in that coffee shop, so close I could touch it but still out of reach. At 3 a.m., I gave up and went downstairs to make tea, only to find Grandpa Joe already in the kitchen, staring out the window at his Mustang in the moonlight. Couldn't sleep either. I asked. He shook his head. Keep thinking about what your grandmother would say if she could see this mess. I sat down beside him, following his gaze to the car. What would she say? That I'm a damn fool who let a pretty face turn him into someone she wouldn't recognize. His voice was barely a whisper. Ruth always said that car was just metal and chrome. Said what mattered was the memories we made in it, not the car itself. Then why can't you let it go? Because those memories are all I have left of her. Our first date was in that car, drove her to the county fair in 1973. Brought your father home from the hospital in that back seat. Taught you to drive stick shift in that driver's seat when you turned 16. I remembered that day. How patient he'd been as I stalled out 6 times in the Walmart parking lot, how proud he'd looked when I finally made it around the lot without killing the engine. Those memories don't disappear if you sell the car, Grandpa. Don't they? He turned to look at me, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Because it feels like everything good in my life is slipping away. Ruth, then your parents, now you. Maybe Candy was right to leave, maybe I really can't provide anything worth having anymore. Stop it. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Candy was a gold digger who saw a lonely old man with assets to liquidate. She never cared about you. At least she chose to be with me. No, she chose to be with your bank account. There's a difference. Before he could respond, both our phones buzzed simultaneously. A text to the family group chat that Candy had never bothered to leave. Asterisk check my Instagram story. Ring airplane hashtag new beginnings hashtag phoenixbound hashtag upgrade complete asterisk. I opened Instagram with a sick feeling in my stomach. Candy's story showed her on an airplane, champagne glass in hand, flashing Grandpa Joe's $11,000 ring next to a boarding pass to Phoenix. The next slide was a photo of a man in an expensive suit, Brandon, presumably, with the caption, reunited with my real soulmate. Some people know how to treat a queen right crown. Jesus Christ, Grandpa Joe breathed, staring at his phone. The final slide made my blood boil, a screenshot of her previous posts about the fairytale wedding at the country club, with text overlay reading, plans change when you realize you deserve better. Sometimes you have to kiss a frog before you find your prince. Hashtag no regrets hashtag living my best life. She's bragging about it, I said, my voice tight with rage. She's actually bragging about taking your money and running. Grandpa Joe set his phone face down on the table. Maybe she's right. Maybe she did deserve better than a broke old fool. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. You want to know what's really pathetic? It's not that she used you, it's that you're still defending her. Emma. No, listen to me. You sold my dead parents' belongings to buy that woman jewelry and a wedding she never intended to go through with. She probably had one foot out the door from the moment you told her about the money problems. My phone rang, Sarah's number. I answered it immediately. Emma, thank God you're awake. I've been doing research all night. Her voice was excited, slightly manic with caffeine and determination. That jewelry dealer Marcus mentioned. His name is Victor Castellanos, and he's not just any dealer, he specializes in estate jewelry. High-end stuff. Okay, and I found his website. Emma, your mother's wedding ring is on there. Listed for $1,200. My knees nearly gave out. Are you sure? I'm looking at the photo right now. Platinum band, emerald cut diamond, vintage 1970s setting. The description matches exactly what you told me. I sank back into my chair, my heart pounding. $1,200. There's more. I called the consignment shop on 5th Street about your mother's china. They still have it, nobody's bought a full set in months. They want $400 for the whole collection. I grabbed a pen and started scribbling numbers on a napkin. So that's $1,600 just for those two things. Plus the $3,200 for Dad's guitar. $4,800 total. Emma, that's less than you'd get for the Mustang, even at the low end. I looked at Grandpa Joe, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation with growing understanding. There's something else, Sarah continued. I found Mrs. Henderson's phone number. You know, your neighbor who bought your mom's paintings. I called her an hour ago. At 2 in the morning. She's an insomniac, she didn't mind. Emma, she feels terrible about the whole thing. Says your grandfather seemed desperate when he sold them, and she only bought them because she always admired your mother's work. She wants to sell them back to you for exactly what she paid, $300. $5,100. It was actually possible. I hung up with Sarah and looked across the table at my grandfather, who was staring at Candy's Instagram story again. You heard all that? I asked. He nodded slowly. $5,100 would get back your mother's ring, her china, her paintings, and your father's guitar. The most important pieces, anyway. And a 1965 Mustang in mint condition would sell for at least $35,000. We sat there in the kitchen where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for 4 years, where we planned my future over cups of coffee, where we become a family after losing everyone else. Grandpa, I said quietly, what if we made a deal? His eyebrows raised. What kind of deal? You sell the Mustang. We use $5,000 to buy back Mom and Dad's things. The other $30,000 goes toward your debts, pays off the credit cards, covers the mortgage payments until you can figure out a long-term solution. And what do I give you in return? Your word that you'll never make a major decision about this family without talking to me first. And I hesitated, then forged ahead. We go to counseling together. Family therapy. Because this isn't just about the money or the car or even Candy. This is about the fact that we almost lost each other, and I can't let that happen again. Grandpa Joe was quiet for a long time, his fingers drumming against the table. Finally, he said, that car has been in this family for 42 years. And I've been in this family for 22 years. Which one matters more? He closed his eyes, and I could see him wrestling with the decision that would change everything. When Grandpa Joe opened his eyes, they were filled with tears I hadn't seen since Grandma Ruth's funeral. Okay, he whispered. Let's make the call. I stared at him, hardly believing what I'd heard. Really? Really? He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I know a guy who deals in classic cars, Tommy Brennan. He's been after me to sell the Mustang for years. Always said he had buyers lined up. My heart was racing as he scrolled through his contacts, but something nagged at me. Grandpa, wait. What if Tommy lowballs you? What if he offers 20,000, or 25? Then I'll take it, he said simply. Emma, I've spent the last 6 months making decisions based on what I wanted instead of what was right. I'm done with that. Before he could dial, my phone rang. Unknown number, Phoenix area code. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. Hello. Is this Emma Mitchell? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Yes, who's this? My name is Brandon Reeves. I believe you know my fiancée, Candace. My blood went cold. Candace. I'd never heard anyone call her by her full name. What do you want? I asked, putting the phone on speaker so Grandpa Joe could hear. Well, there's been a slight complication with Candace's previous arrangement. It seems there are some ownership disputes regarding certain jewelry items she brought with her. I looked at Grandpa Joe, whose face had gone ashen. What kind of ownership disputes? Brandon's voice took on the careful tone of someone delivering bad news. The engagement ring and wedding band she's wearing, our jeweler here in Phoenix examined them for insurance purposes and discovered they were purchased with a credit card that's currently in default. Technically, until that debt is resolved, the items could be considered fraudulently obtained. What are you saying? Grandpa Joe leaned toward the phone. I'm saying Candace may have misrepresented her financial situation. The credit card company has already flagged the jewelry purchase for collection. If she doesn't return to resolve this matter, they'll pursue charges for theft by deception. I felt a surge of vindictive satisfaction, followed immediately by a more complicated emotion. So she has to come back. Either that, or someone needs to pay the outstanding balance on the card. $11,437, including interest and fees. Grandpa Joe made a strangled sound. She maxed out another credit card. It appears she opened a new account using your home address and credit history as collateral, Brandon continued. Mr. Mitchell, I think you and I need to have a conversation about your legal options here. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in around us. I grabbed my grandfather's arm as he swayed in his chair. Are you a lawyer? I asked Brandon. Corporate law, primarily, but I have colleagues who handle fraud cases. Look, I'll be direct with you, I had no idea about any of this when Candace showed up at my door yesterday. I thought she was legitimately ending her relationship with your grandfather. Now I'm wondering what else she hasn't told me. So what happens now? Now I drive her back to Flagstaff tomorrow morning to sort this out. She's not happy about it, but she doesn't have much choice. The alternative is potentially facing criminal charges. After Brandon hung up, Grandpa Joe and I sat in stunned silence. The irony wasn't lost on me. We'd been planning to sell his most treasured possession to clean up Candy's mess, and now it turned out the mess was even bigger than we'd known. 11,000 more, he said finally. On top of everything else. I did the math quickly. 37,000 total. Even if you sell the Mustang for 40,000, that's only 3,000 left over. Not enough to buy back your parents' things. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, asterisk the jewelry dealer leaves town Thursday morning. If you're going to get your mom's ring, it has to be tomorrow, asterisk. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to come up with a plan that would save my grandfather from financial ruin and get back the last pieces of my parents I had left. I looked at the Mustang through the kitchen window, gleaming in the driveway like a beautiful, complicated answer to an impossible question. The next morning brought chaos I wasn't prepared for. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of car doors slamming in our driveway, followed by Candy's unmistakable voice pitched at a level that could shatter glass. This is ridiculous, Brandon. I'm not going in there. I stumbled to my bedroom window and peered through the blinds. A sleek black BMW sat behind Grandpa Joe's Mustang, and Candy was standing beside it in designer jeans and heels, gesturing wildly at our house like it might contaminate her. Brandon, tall, impeccably dressed, looking like he'd stepped out of a law firm commercial, stood beside her with the patience of someone used to managing difficult clients. Candace, we discussed this, his voice carried clearly in the morning air. You need to resolve the credit situation before it becomes a legal matter. But I don't want to see Joey. He's probably going to cry and beg me to come back, and it's just pathetic. I threw on clothes and rushed downstairs, finding Grandpa Joe already at the kitchen table with coffee and what looked like every financial document he owned spread out in front of him. They're here, I said. I heard. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly as he sorted through credit card statements. I've been up since 4, trying to figure out exactly how deep this hole goes. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by aggressive knocking. Through the front window, I could see Brandon's polite lawyer smile and Candy's scowl. Joseph Mitchell. Brandon extended his hand when Grandpa Joe opened the door. Brandon Reeves. We spoke briefly last night. Candy pushed past both of them into our living room like she still belonged here. God, this place is so depressing. Joey, you really need to update your decor. It's like a museum in here. Candace, Brandon's voice carried a warning tone. What? I'm just saying. She plopped down on the couch where she'd spent countless hours watching reality TV. Anyway, Brandon says there's some mix-up with my credit card, so let's just fix it and get out of here. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Something about this whole situation felt off, and I wanted documentation. It's not a mix-up, Grandpa Joe said quietly. You opened a credit account using false information and charged $11,000 in jewelry to it. False information. Candy's voice went up an octave. I listed you as my co-signer. We're practically married. I corrected. You left, remember? Posted about it on Instagram. Brandon cleared his throat and pulled out a tablet. I've reviewed the credit application, and there are some concerning discrepancies. Candace, you listed Mr. Mitchell as your spouse and claimed joint ownership of this property. So you're not married, and you have no legal claim to his assets. Brandon's lawyer voice was coming out now, professional and slightly cold. The credit company considers this fraudulent misrepresentation. But Joey said I could. Candy turned to my grandfather with tears that looked suspiciously fake. Remember? You said what's yours is mine. Grandpa Joe's face went red. I never said you could open credit accounts in my name. Technically, Brandon interrupted, studying his tablet. The account is in her name, but she used your income and property value to qualify for the credit limit. It's a gray area legally, but ethically. He trailed off diplomatically. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, asterisk at the jewelry dealer now. He's packing up early, has a buyer for your mom's ring coming at noon. Need answer ASAP, asterisk. Noon. It was already 8:47 a.m. Look, I said, what needs to happen to make this go away? Brandon consulted his tablet again. The simplest solution would be for someone to pay the outstanding balance, $11 for 37 as of this morning. That would close the account and resolve the fraud concern. Or, Candy said brightly, Joey could just agree that he co-signed for everything, and then it's not fraud, right? Absolutely not, Grandpa Joe said firmly. Candy, I'm done enabling your spending. Fine. She jumped up from the couch, her mask finally slipping completely. Then I'll just tell them you promised to marry me and pay for everything. It's my word against yours, and I have Instagram posts to prove we were engaged. Actually, Brandon said mildly, you also have posts from yesterday about leaving him for someone who could treat you right. Those might undermine your credibility. Candy's face flushed red as she realized her social media documentation was working against her. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Brandon, let's just leave. Let them deal with their own problems. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Brandon said. Candace, if you don't resolve this, the credit company will pursue collection against you personally. Given that you have no significant assets or income, that could mean wage garnishment, liens, possibly criminal charges. What are you saying? I'm saying you need to work something out with Mr. Mitchell, or you're going to have much bigger problems than a cancelled wedding. My phone buzzed again. Sarah, asterisk urgent, ring buyer is here early. Dealer needs decision in 30 minutes or he's selling to them, asterisk. I looked at the chaos in our living room, Candy having a meltdown, Brandon trying to manage the legal implications, Grandpa Joe looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. 30 minutes to decide whether to let my mother's ring disappear forever, or take a gamble that could change everything. The decision crystallized in my mind with sudden, perfect clarity. I looked at Candy, still ranting about how unfair everything was, at Brandon checking his watch like he had better places to be, at my grandfather drowning in papers and debt and regret. I'll be right back, I said, and walked straight out to the garage. The Mustang's keys hung on their familiar hook by the workbench. I'd watched Grandpa Joe hang them there thousands of times, always in the exact same spot, always with the same careful precision. My hands were surprisingly steady as I took them down. The car started with a purr that sounded like 42 years of perfect maintenance. I'd only driven it a handful of times, Grandpa Joe was protective of it in a way that bordered on obsessive, but muscle memory kicked in as I backed out of the garage. Through the kitchen window, I could see them all frozen in tableau, Candy with her mouth open mid-sentence, Brandon looking confused, Grandpa Joe starting toward the door with panic in his eyes. I rolled down the window as he reached the driveway. I'll be back in 2 hours, I called out. Emma, what are you doing? Something you should have done 6 months ago, I said, and drove away before he could stop me. My phone started ringing immediately, Grandpa Joe, then Sarah, then Grandpa Joe again. I let them all go to voicemail as I navigated through morning traffic toward downtown, toward Tommy Brennan's classic car lot that I'd driven past 100 times without ever thinking I'd need it. Tommy was exactly what you'd expect from a guy who'd been selling vintage cars for 30 years, grease under his fingernails, coffee-stained coveralls, and eyes that lit up like Christmas morning when he saw the Mustang pull into his lot. Well, I'll be damned, he said, walking around the car with the reverence of someone appraising a piece of art. Joe Mitchell finally decided to sell. He's thinking about it, I said carefully. What would something like this go for? Tommy crouched down to examine the undercarriage, then popped the hood to check the engine. Original 289 V8, factory paint job, interiors pristine. Emma, right? I remember when Joe taught you to drive in this beauty. Yeah, that's me. He know you're here. I hesitated. It's complicated. Family situation. Tommy's expression grew more serious. What kind of family situation? So I told him. About Candy and the wedding debt, about my parents' belongings sold for deposits on a marriage that lasted less than a week, about the credit card fraud and the mounting bills and the very real possibility that we'd lose the house anyway. Jesus, Tommy said when I finished. And Joe's too proud to sell the car himself. He was. This morning changed things. Tommy walked around the Mustang one more time, then leaned against the driver's side door. I'll give you $42,000 for it. Cash. Right now. My phone buzzed with another call from Grandpa Joe. This time I answered. Emma, where are you? His voice was strained, barely controlled. Tommy's lot. He's offering $42,000. Silence. Then, Emma, you can't. I can, and I will, unless you get down here in the next 20 minutes and do it yourself. That's blackmail. That's motivation. Grandpa, Candy's credit card mess isn't going away. The jewelry dealer leaves town in an hour. We can fix this right now, or we can lose everything trying to hold on to a car. More silence. Through the phone, I could hear Candy's voice in the background, rising in pitch as she realized what was happening. 20 minutes, I repeated, and hung up. Tommy was grinning now. You know, your grandfather's been like a son to me. Watching him get played by that girl, it's been hard. So you'll hold the offer. I'll do better than that, he said, pulling out his phone. I'll call the bank and have them prepare a cashier's check. $42,000, ready when you are. 18 minutes later, Grandpa Joe's truck screeched into the parking lot. Grandpa Joe climbed out of his truck moving like a man headed to his own execution. Behind him, Brandon's BMW pulled in with Candy gesturing frantically from the passenger seat. Apparently, this had become a group expedition. Emma. Grandpa Joe's voice was steady, but I could see his hands shaking. We need to talk. We needed to talk 6 months ago, I said, dangling the Mustang keys. Before you decided Candy's happiness was worth more than our family's history. Tommy stepped forward, sensing the gravity of the moment. Joe, I'm sorry it's come to this. But the offer stands, $42,000, cash deal, today. Candy burst out of the BMW like a blonde tornado. Are you people insane? You're going to sell a stupid car instead of just paying my credit card bill. Your credit card bill, Grandpa Joe said quietly, that you lied to get. I didn't lie. I said we were engaged, which we were. I said I lived at your house, which I did. Her voice was reaching dog whistle frequencies. It's not my fault you couldn't follow through on your promises. Brandon approached with the measured steps of someone trying to control damage. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, I interrupted. We're done with private discussions and family meetings and pretending this is anything other than what it is. I looked directly at Candy. You're a con artist who targeted a lonely old man, and you're upset that the con fell apart. I loved Joey. You loved his bank account. There's a difference. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Asterisk dealer is literally walking to his car. Make the call now, asterisk. I looked at the Mustang, sitting there like 42 years of Sunday drives and driving lessons and memories that belonged to a grandfather I used to respect. Then I looked at Grandpa Joe, who was staring at the car like it might disappear if he blinked. Tommy, I said, make the call to the bank. Emma, wait. Grandpa Joe's voice cracked. Please. Just, give me 1 minute. He walked to the Mustang and placed both hands on the hood, his head bowed like he was praying. The lot fell silent except for distant traffic and Candy's impatient huffing. When he looked up, his eyes were clear for the first time in months. Tommy, he said, 42,000. That's right, Joe. Clean title, cash deal. And that'll cover the credit cards, the jewelry debt, and leave enough for Emma to buy back her parents' things. With money left over, I confirmed. Grandpa Joe nodded slowly, then pulled his wallet from his back pocket and retrieved a small, worn piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully, a receipt from 1981, faded but still legible. Purchased this car for $4,800 when your dad was 6 years old. Thought I'd drive it forever. Grandpa. But your grandmother was right. It's just metal and chrome. He handed Tommy the receipt like he was signing his own death warrant. Make the deal. Candy's shriek could have shattered windows. This is insane. Brandon, do something. Actually, Brandon said, checking his phone, this solves my problem too. Candace, with the car money covering your debt, we can go home without any legal complications. But I don't want to go home. I want to stay and fight for what's mine. Nothing here is yours, I said, dialing Sarah's number. And it never was. Sarah, I said when she answered, tell the dealer we're buying the ring. I'll have the money in an hour. As Tommy headed inside to finalize the paperwork, I watched my grandfather say goodbye to his car, running his fingers along the chrome one last time. Thank you, I said quietly. Ask me in a year if it was worth it, he replied, but for the first time in months, he was looking at me instead of away from me. By 3 p.m., we had $42,000 in cash and no car in the driveway. The empty garage looked like a mouth with a missing tooth, 42 years of automotive pride reduced to an oil stain on the concrete floor. First stop, the jewelry dealer, I said, clutching the cashier's check like it might evaporate. Then the consignment shop, then Mrs. Henderson from Mom's paintings. Grandpa Joe nodded from the passenger seat of my Honda Civic, looking smaller somehow without his Mustang. What about the guitar? Robert said he'd meet us at Fletcher's pawn shop at 4. Neutral territory. I pulled out of Tommy's lot, trying not to look back at the empty space where the Mustang had been. Behind us, Brandon's BMW followed at a distance. Apparently he was personally escorting Candy to each stop to ensure the debts got paid. The credit card company had already confirmed they'd accept payment and close the fraud investigation, but only if it happened today. Emma, Grandpa Joe said quietly as we drove through downtown, I need to tell you something. What? There might be more debt than we discussed. My stomach dropped. How much more? I'm not sure exactly. Candy had access to my checking account for the last 2 months. Said she needed it for wedding expenses, but... He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app with shaking fingers. I've been afraid to look. I pulled over into a McDonald's parking lot, my heart pounding. Show me. The screen loaded, and I felt the blood drain from my face. The account that should have had at least $3,000 from his Social Security payments showed a balance of $247.82. Jesus, Grandpa. What did she buy? He scrolled through the transaction history with growing horror. $400 at Sephora, $650 at Nordstrom, $380 at some place called Lash Extensions by Britney, $290 for something called a couple's massage package. Stop. I did quick mental math. That's almost $2,000 in random spending, on top of everything else. There's more. Look at this, $1, $200 to something called Phoenix Party Rentals. What the hell did she rent in Phoenix? My phone buzzed with a call from Brandon. I put it on speaker. We have a problem, his voice was tense. Candace just admitted she may have made some additional purchases in your grandfather's name. What kind of purchases? Apparently she booked a honeymoon suite in Cabo for next week. Non-refundable. $3,400. I stared at Grandpa Joe, who looked like he might throw up. She booked a honeymoon. For what wedding? The one with me, apparently, Brandon said dryly. She assumed we'd want to celebrate getting back together. The resort is refusing to cancel because it's less than 7 days out. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice getting dangerous. On top of the wedding debt, the jewelry debt, and the credit card fraud, she also spent another $5,000 on random shopping and a vacation for her and her new boyfriend? It appears so, yes. I looked at our cashier's check. $42,000 suddenly didn't seem like enough. With all of Candy's additional spending, we were looking at nearly $45,000 in total debt. Brandon, I said, put her on the phone. Emma, I don't think. Put her on the phone. Now. There was rustling, then Candy's voice, sulky and defensive. What? The Cabo trip. You're canceling it. I can't. It's non-refundable. Besides, Brandon and I deserve a nice vacation after all this stress. Then you're paying for it yourself. With what money? You people took everything. I looked at my grandfather, broken and defeated in the passenger seat, then at the check in my hand that was supposed to buy back my parents' belongings. The jewelry, I said quietly. You're selling the jewelry back. Silence on the other end of the phone. Candy, you're going to sell that $11,000 engagement ring and wedding band. Today. And you're going to use the money to pay for your Cabo trip and cover the rest of your spending spree. Absolutely not. These rings are mine. Those rings were bought with fraudulent credit. Either you sell them voluntarily, or Brandon's lawyer friends can explain to a judge how you obtained them. More silence. Then Brandon's voice came back on the line. Give us 30 minutes, he said. We'll meet you at the jewelry dealer. As we drove toward our first stop, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For months, I'd been reacting to Grandpa Joe's choices, trying to fix problems he'd created. Now, finally, I was taking control. You proud of me? I asked him. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes for a long time. Your parents would be proud of you. It was, I realized, the first time in 6 months he'd mentioned them without looking guilty. The jewelry dealer's shop was a cramped storefront squeezed between a dry cleaner and a tax prep office, the kind of place that looked like it dealt in desperation more than luxury. Victor Castellanos was exactly what I'd expected, mid-50s, thick glasses, the calculating stare of someone who made his living off other people's misfortune. You're here about the platinum ring, he said before we'd even introduced ourselves. Sarah Chin called ahead. My heart jumped. Is it still available? For now. But I have another buyer coming at 5. He gestured toward a glass case behind the counter. Vintage 1970s setting, emerald cut diamond, quarter carat. Beautiful piece. There it was, Mom's wedding ring, sitting under harsh fluorescent lights like a prisoner. Dad had saved for 6 months to buy that ring, working double shifts at the factory so he could afford the perfect setting for the woman he loved. How much? Grandpa Joe asked quietly. $1,200, as discussed. Cash only. Before I could respond, the shop's bell chimed and Candy strutted in wearing designer sunglasses and an attitude that could cut glass. Brandon followed behind her, looking like a man seriously reconsidering his life choices. So this is where you people pawn your family heirlooms, Candy announced, surveying the shop with obvious distaste. How quaint. We're here to sell, not buy, Brandon said diplomatically, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. The engagement ring and wedding band we discussed. Victor's eyes lit up as he examined the rings under his jeweler's loupe. Tiffany setting, 2-carat center stone, matching band, yes, I can work with these. Given the current market, I can offer $8,000 for the pair. $8,000. Candy shrieked. Joey paid $11,000 for just the engagement ring. Retail and resale are different animals, Victor said with practiced patience. $8,000 is a fair price for a quick sale. Brandon pulled out his phone and started calculating. The Cabo trip was $3,400, plus your various shopping expenses brings us to about $5,600 total. $8,000 would cover everything with money left over. But I don't want to sell them. Candy's voice was approaching frequencies only dogs could hear. They're beautiful. They match my complexion. Candace, Brandon's voice carried a warning tone, we discussed this. I watched this whole exchange while holding my breath, afraid that somehow Candy's tantrum might derail our only chance to get Mom's ring back. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, asterisk at the consignment shop. China is still here but another buyer is looking at it. Need ETA, asterisk. Victor, I interrupted, if we buy my mother's ring now, will you give us first right of refusal on anything else that comes through from Fletcher's pawn shop? My grandfather sold some other pieces there last week. Depends on what we're talking about. I pulled out the crumpled list. A jewelry box, some vintage brooches, maybe a few other items. Victor scanned the list and nodded. Marcus at Fletcher's is a friend of mine. Yeah, I can keep an eye out. But your mother's ring, decision time. My other buyer will be here in 90 minutes. Grandpa Joe pulled out our cashier's check and handed it to me. Do it. I started to endorse the check, then stopped. Wait. Candy, are you selling the rings or not? This is highway robbery, she wailed. This is reality, I said firmly. $8,000 for jewelry you fraudulently obtained, or we let Brandon's lawyer friends sort it out through the courts. Brandon whispered something urgent in her ear. Finally, she threw her hands up in defeat. Fine. But I'm keeping the wedding band from Phoenix. Brandon bought that one fair and square. 20 minutes later, I walked out of Victor's shop carrying a small velvet bag containing my mother's wedding ring. The sensation of having it back, the weight of it, the familiar feel of the platinum band, nearly brought me to my knees. One down, Grandpa Joe said softly. Free to go, I replied, checking the time. And we're running out of daylight. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the same kitchen where this all began, but everything is different now. Dad's 1967 Fender Stratocaster leans against the wall beside the table, catching the afternoon light through windows that now display Mom's watercolor paintings. Her wedding ring sits on my finger, I wear it on my right hand, a daily reminder that some things are worth fighting for. The house is still ours. Barely. Grandpa Joe's Social Security covers the mortgage payments now that we've paid down most of the debt, and he's picked up a part-time job at Tommy's car lot. Turns out 42 years of loving cars translates into pretty decent sales skills when you're motivated by necessity instead of pride. You ready for this? Sarah asks, checking her watch. She's been accepted to medical school at Johns Hopkins, but she's deferring for a year to help her parents with their restaurant. Some things are more important than timelines. I look at my laptop screen, where I've been writing the last 6 months into something coherent. The Reddit post has been therapeutic in ways I didn't expect, forcing me to examine not just what happened, but why it mattered. Almost, I say, typing the final paragraphs. Candy married Brandon 3 weeks after our jewelry shop showdown. I know because she tagged me in an Instagram post from their intimate Phoenix wedding, apparently 37 guests counted as intimate in her world. The ring she kept looked appropriately gaudy against her spray tan. They filed for divorce 4 months later when Brandon discovered she'd opened credit cards in his name too. Some people never learn. Grandpa Joe did learn, though. He's been seeing Dr. Patricia Wells, a family therapist who specializes in grief counseling, every Tuesday for 5 months now. We go together twice a month, working through the complicated mess of loss and loneliness and the ways people can fail each other even when they love each other. The hardest session was when he admitted that selling my parents' belongings wasn't really about the money. It was about erasing reminders of the daughter-in-law and son he'd failed to save, even though their car accident was nobody's fault. Candy represented a do-over, a chance to be the kind of man who could protect someone, provide for someone, matter to someone. I thought if I could make her happy, he told Dr. Wells, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, maybe it would prove I wasn't useless. And what did you prove instead? She asked gently. That running from grief only makes you lose more than you already had. Now the china cabinet holds Mom's restored china set, and Dad's other guitars have slowly found their way back home as items surface in estate sales and online listings. We're still missing some pieces, probably always will be, but we've recovered what mattered most. The Mustang, though. That's gone forever. Tommy sold it to a collector in California who sends Christmas cards every year with photos of car shows and cross-country road trips. Sometimes I catch Grandpa Joe looking at those pictures with a wistful expression, but he never says he regrets the choice. It's just metal and chrome, he told me last week, echoing Grandma Ruth's old words. What matters is that we're still family. I saved the document and closed the laptop. Tomorrow I start my senior year, and after graduation I'll probably still move to Portland like I always planned. But now I know that distance doesn't have to mean abandonment, and that sometimes the only way to save a family is to be willing to lose everything else first. The garage is still empty, but we've filled it with something better, the understanding that love isn't about keeping things perfect, it's about doing whatever it takes to keep them real.